The rain hammered against the windows of the small apartment as Sophia Chen sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of overdue bills spread before her. Her hands trembled as she calculated the numbers for the 100th time, hoping somehow the math would change. It never did. 24 years old, fresh out of university with a literature degree, and she was watching her family's world crumble around her. Her mother, Margaret, paced nervously behind her, wringing her hands. The elegant woman who once hosted charity galas now wore a faded dress and worry lines that seemed to have appeared overnight. Their fall from grace had been swift and merciless. When her father's construction company collapsed after a series of failed investments and a major client's bankruptcy, "There has to be another way," Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm outside. "I could get another job, work nights." Margaret stopped pacing and placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Darling, we've explored every option. The bank wants payment in full by the end of the month, or we lose everything." Her voice cracked slightly. "The house, your father's business, even this apartment." A sharp knock at the door interrupted their despair. Margaret exchanged a puzzled glance with Sophia before moving to answer it. Standing in the doorway was a tall man in an expensive black suit, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the rain. He held a briefcase and wore the kind of confidence that money could buy. "Mrs. Chen." His voice was smooth, professional. "Name is James Crawford. I represent Mr. Vincent Blackwood. He would like to discuss a business proposition with your family." Sophia felt her blood run cold. Everyone knew the name Vincent Blackwood, a tech mogul who had built an empire from nothing, only to become a recluse after some personal tragedy. Years ago, he was worth billions, but rarely appeared in public anymore. Conducting his business from behind layers of lawyers and assistants, Margaret hesitated before stepping, sighed to let the man enter. James surveyed their modest apartment with neutral eyes before setting his briefcase on their coffee table. "Mr. Blackwood is aware of your family's financial difficulties," he began without preamble. "He's prepared to offer a solution." "A kind of solution?" Sophia asked, her instincts screaming that this was too good to be true. James opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick document, a marriage contract. 1 year, Mr. Blackwood will clear all of your family's debts, provide a substantial living allowance, and ensure your father's business is restored to full operation. He paused, his gaze settling on Sophia. In exchange, Miss Chen would become Mrs. Blackwood for the duration of the contract. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia stared at the papers as if they were written in a foreign language. "You're talking about selling me?" she said finally, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement," James replied calmly. "Mr. Blackwood requires a wife for certain social and business obligations. You require financial security. The contract includes separate living quarters, no physical obligations, and complete financial independence for your family." Margaret sank into her chair, overwhelmed. "This is madness. We can't possibly ask Sophia to sacrifice herself for our mistakes." But Sophia was already reading the contract, her literature background helping her parse the legal language. The terms were surprisingly fair, almost generous. Vincent Blackwood would pay off their debts immediately, provide her parents with a comfortable home, and give her access to resources most people could only dream of. All she had to do was play the role of his wife for 1 year. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Could have anyone." James studied her for a moment. "Mr. Blackwood values intelligence and independence. Your academic achievements, your family background, and your current circumstances make you an ideal candidate. You need what he can provide, and you won't develop inconvenient emotional attachments." The last comment stung more than it should have. Sophia closed the contract and looked at her mother's tear-stained face. 3 generations of her family's legacy hung in the balance. Grandparents had immigrated with nothing and built something beautiful. Her parents had worked their entire lives to give her opportunities. Now she had the chance to save it all. "Need time to think," she said. James nodded and stood. "Mr. Blackwood requires an answer by tomorrow evening. If you agree, a car will pick you up on Saturday morning." He handed her a business card. "The financial arrangements will begin immediately upon your signature. After James left, Sophia and her mother sat in silence for a long time. The rain continued its relentless assault on the windows, each drop seeming to echo the ticking of time running out. "You don't have to do this," Margaret whispered finally. "We'll find another way." But Sophia knew better. There was no other way. She thought about her father, Thomas, who was probably at the office right now, desperately trying to salvage something from the wreckage of his life's work. She thought about her dreams of becoming a writer, of finding love, of living a normal life. Then she thought about watching her family lose everything while she stood by helplessly. The next evening, she called the number on James's card. Saturday morning arrived, gray and cold. Sophia stood outside her apartment building with a single suitcase, watching a black limousine approach through the mist. She had barely slept, her mind racing with questions about the man she was about to marry. What was Vincent Blackwood really? Like, what had happened to make him such a recluse? And most importantly, what would he expect from her? The limousine was luxury beyond anything she had ever experienced. Soft leather seats, a small bar, and windows tinted so dark she couldn't see outside. James sat across from her, reviewing documents on his tablet. "The estate is about an hour outside the city," he explained without looking up. "Mr. Blackwood values his privacy. You'll have your own wing of the house, complete with a library, study, sitting room. Mrs. Patterson, the head housekeeper, will help you settle in." Sophia nodded, not trusting her voice. The countryside rolled by in a blur of green fields and ancient trees. Eventually, they turned through massive iron gates and up a winding drive lined with oak trees. The mansion that came into view was breathtaking and intimidating in equal measure. Gothic architecture mixed with modern glass additions, creating something both timeless and contemporary. The car stopped in front of a grand entrance, where a woman in her 50s waited. Mrs. Patterson had kind eyes and a warm smile that helped ease some of Sophia's tension. "Welcome to Blackwood Estate, dear," she said, taking Sophia's suitcase. "I'll show you to your rooms and let you settle in before dinner." As they walked through the marble foyer, Sophia caught glimpses of oil paintings, ancient tapestries, and furnishings that probably cost more than her family's entire apartment. Everything was beautiful but cold, like a museum rather than a home. Her suite was larger than her parents' entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens, and a cozy reading nook was already stocked with classic literature. Despite the luxury, she felt more like a prisoner than a princess. "Mr. Blackwood will join you for dinner at 8, Mrs. Patterson said gently. "Don't worry, dear. Not as frightening as the newspapers make him out to be." Alone in her new prison of silk and marble, Sophia wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Outside her window, storm clouds gathered again. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to discover there were far worse things than being poor. At exactly 8 o'clock, she made her way to the dining room, wearing the simple black dress her mother had insisted she pack. Her hands shook slightly as she pushed open the heavy wooden doors, not knowing that her life was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. Vincent Blackwood stood with his back to the dining room entrance, staring out at the storm clouds gathering over his estate. Sophia paused in the doorway, taking her first real look at the man who had bought her future. He was taller than she had expected, with broad shoulders that spoke of hidden strength beneath his tailored suit. His dark hair was streaked with silver at the temples, and when he finally turned to face her, she was struck by the intensity of his green eyes. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice deep and carefully controlled. There was no warmth in his greeting, but no cruelty either, simply acknowledgement. "Please sit." The dining table could have seated 20 people, but only 2 places were set at one end. Sophia took her seat across from him, acutely aware of the space between them that felt both too much and not enough.
Ow.
Vincent remained standing until she was seated, his manners impeccable, despite his emotional distance. "I trust James explained the terms of our arrangement clearly," he said, finally taking his seat. A member of the staff appeared silently to serve the first course, some kind of delicate soup that probably cost more than Sophia's weekly grocery budget. "He did," she replied, proud that her voice remained steady. "Though I have to admit I Still don't understand why you chose this particular solution to whatever problem you're trying to solve. Vincent's green eyes studied her with uncomfortable intensity.
You're direct.
I appreciate that. He took a measured sip of his soup. The answer's simple. I need a wife for certain business and social obligations, but I have no interest in the complications that come with genuine relationships. You need financial security and have no romantic illusions about our arrangement. How do you know I have no romantic illusions? Sophia challenged, surprising herself with her boldness. For the first time, something flickered across Vincent's features. Not quite amusement, but perhaps recognition that she wasn't going to be the meek, grateful woman he had expected. Because, if you did, you would never have agreed to marry a stranger for money. The comment stung because it held a grain of truth, but Sophia refused to let him see her flinch. You don't know anything about me, Mr. Blackwood. You know my financial situation and my academic record, but you don't know who I am. Vincent, he corrected quietly. We are married after all. He gestured to the thin gold band on her finger, placed there during a cold, impersonal ceremony that morning with only James and Mrs. Patterson as witnesses. And you're right, I don't know who you are. Not particularly interested in learning. His words were designed to create distance, but Sophia caught something in his voice that contradicted them. A hesitation, perhaps even curiosity. She decided to test her theory. You won't mind if I explore the house and grounds? Since I'll be living here for a year, I'd like to understand my new home. Vincent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The West Wing is off limits. Everything else is available to you? He paused, then added more softly, Mrs. Patterson can show you around tomorrow. The rest of dinner passed in relative silence, punctuated only by polite requests to pass condiments and brief comments about the weather. But Sophia found herself studying Vincent when she thought he wasn't looking. Despite his cold demeanor, she noticed the way his hands occasionally trembled slightly, the way his eyes would drift to the windows as if he were seeing something she couldn't. This was a man carrying tremendous pain, she realized, and for reasons she couldn't explain. She found herself wanting to understand what had wounded him so deeply. After dinner, Vincent excused himself to his study, leaving Sophia to explore her new surroundings alone. Mrs. Patterson found her in the library an hour later, curled up in a leather chair with a first edition of Jane Austen. Finding everything to your liking, dear? The older woman asked kindly. Replied honestly. But it feels so empty. Like a house where people once lived but don't anymore. Mrs. Patterson's expression grew sad. You're not wrong. This place used to be full of life and laughter, but that was before. She trailed off, seeming to catch herself. Before what? Sophia asked gently. The housekeeper glanced toward the door, then lowered her voice. Before Miss Rebecca died. She was Mr. Vincent's fiancée. Lovely girl, full of spirit. Much like yourself, actually. Sophia felt something cold settle in her stomach. What happened to her? Car accident. 3 years ago. She was on her way here for their engagement party when a drunk driver ran a red light. Mrs. Patterson's voice was barely a whisper. Mr. Vincent blamed himself, said if he hadn't insisted on having the party that night, she would still be alive. The pieces began falling into place. Vincent's emotional walls, his insistence on a marriage without love, his choice of the West Wing as forbidden territory. He wasn't just a cold businessman. He was a man destroyed by grief and guilt. He loved her very much, Sophia said, and it wasn't a question. More than life itself, Mrs. Patterson confirmed. After she died, he became like a ghost in his own house. Threw himself into work, cut off all his friends, refused to see anyone who reminded him of happier times. She looked at Sophia with something like hope in her eyes. But maybe having you here will help him remember how to live again. That night, Sophia lay in her luxurious bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She thought about Vincent's pain, about the woman named Rebecca who had died loving him, about the impossible situation she had walked into. She had agreed to be a wife in name only, but she was beginning to realize that nothing about this arrangement would be simple. The next morning, she woke to find a note slipped under her door. Vincent's handwriting was strong and precise. Business trip to New York. Back Friday. Make yourself at home. It was signed simply with his initial. For the next 3 days, Sophia explored every corner of Blackwood Estate except the forbidden West Wing. She discovered a greenhouse filled with dying plants, a music room with a piano covered in dust, its countless other spaces that spoke of a life interrupted. Mrs. Patterson gradually shared more stories about the Vincent who had existed. Before tragedy struck, a man who had been passionate, generous, and deeply capable of love. He used to throw parties here, Mrs. Patterson told her as they walked through the ballroom. Charity events, celebrations for his employees, holiday gatherings. This place would be filled with hundreds of people, music, dancing, laughter. Miss Rebecca would dance with everyone, making sure no one felt left out. Sophia could almost see it, the grand room alive with light and joy instead of shrouded in silence. "Why did he ask you to stay?" she asked suddenly. "After Rebecca died? Why didn't he fire everyone and start fresh?" Mrs. Patterson smiled sadly. "Because we reminded him of her, but we also reminded him of happiness. Even in his grief, he couldn't quite let go of every connection to the life he'd lost." By the time Vincent returned on Friday evening, Sophia had formed a plan. She couldn't bring Rebecca back, but maybe she could help him find a way to live with his memories instead of being destroyed by them. It was a dangerous game she was contemplating, especially when she was beginning to care more about his pain than she should. She was waiting in the library when he came home, sitting in the same chair where she'd spent her first evening. He paused in the doorway when he saw her, and for just a moment his carefully constructed mask slipped. He looked tired, lonely, and achingly human. "How was your trip?" she asked softly. "Productive," he replied, but his voice lacked its usual firmness. He moved to the fireplace, keeping his distance, but not leaving as she had expected. "Mrs. Patterson has been telling me about the house," Sophia said carefully. "How it used to be." Vincent's shoulders tensed. "The past is irrelevant." "Is it?" she challenged gently. "Because from where I'm sitting, the past is very much alive in this house. It's in every covered room, every dying plant, every silence where laughter used to be." He turned to face her then, and she saw raw pain flash across his features before he could hide it again. "You don't understand what you're talking about." "Then help me understand," she said, rising from her chair. "I'm going to be here for a year, Vincent. We can spend that time as strangers. Or we can try to be friends. But I won't pretend that the woman you loved never existed." For a long moment, they stared at each other across the space that separated them. Then Vincent walked to his desk and pulled out a photograph. His hands shook slightly as he handed it to her. Rebecca Torres had been beautiful, with dark hair and laughing eyes. In the photo, she was spinning in a garden, her dress flowing around her, pure joy radiating from every line of her body. "She made everything brighter," Vincent said quietly. "Every room she entered, every person she met. And I killed her with my selfishness." "No," Sophia said firmly, surprising him with her intensity. "A drunk driver killed her. Your love for her, your desire to celebrate that love with friends and family, that didn't kill anyone." Vincent took the photograph back, cradling it like something precious and fragile. "You sound very certain for someone who wasn't there." "I'm certain because I've seen what your guilt has done to you," she replied. "And I'm certain that if Rebecca loved you the way Mrs. Patterson says she did, she would be heartbroken to see what you've become." The silence that followed was charged with emotion. Vincent stared at the photograph, and Sophia held her breath, wondering if she had pushed too hard, too fast. Finally, he looked up at her with eyes that held the first genuine emotion she had. "Seen from him? Why do you care?" he asked quietly. Sophia considered the question, and her answer surprised her with its honesty. "Because everyone deserves to be more than their worst day. Even you." Something shifted in that moment, some invisible wall beginning to crack. Vincent didn't smile, didn't reach for her, didn't transform into the man he had been before tragedy struck. But he didn't walk away either, and for now that felt like a beginning. 2 months into their strange marriage, Sophia had established a routine that both honored Vincent's need for space and gently challenged his isolation.
She spent
Her mornings in the greenhouse, slowly coaxing life back into the abandoned plants. Her afternoons were for reading in the library, and her evenings were spent in quiet conversation with Vincent over dinner, gradually drawing him out of his shell. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday evening. Sophia was playing piano in the music room, something she hadn't done since college. The melody was soft and melancholy, her fingers finding their way through a piece that spoke to the sadness she felt permeating the house. She didn't notice Vincent standing in the doorway until she finished the song. "Rebecca used to play that," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia turned on the bench to face him. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I can stop." "No," he said, surprising her. "It's been too quiet in this house for too long." He moved into the room, his steps careful and deliberate. She wasn't particularly good at it, but she played with such joy that it didn't matter. "Would you like me to play something else?" Sophia asked gently. Vincent considered the question, then sat in the chair nearest the piano.
To play whatever
"Moves you." So she did. For the next hour, Sophia played everything from classical pieces to contemporary songs, letting the music fill the spaces between them where words couldn't reach. Vincent listened with his eyes closed, and she watched tension gradually leave his shoulders for the first time since she'd met him. He said when she finally stopped. "Got," and there was something new in his voice. Warmth. That night marked the beginning of their real relationship. Vincent started joining her for morning walks through the gardens, sharing stories about the plants and trees that Rebecca had chosen. He showed her his study, his private sanctuary that no one had entered since her death. Slowly, carefully, he began letting her into his world, but their growing closeness didn't go unnoticed by everyone. 3 months into their marriage, David Blackwood arrived unannounced at the estate. Vincent's younger brother was everything Vincent wasn't: charming, social, manipulative, and utterly without conscience. Sophia disliked him on sight, sensing the predatory way he watched both her and Vincent. "So this is the bought bride, David," said with a cruel smile when Vincent introduced them. "I have to admit, brother, your taste in business transactions has improved." Vincent's jaw tightened dangerously. "Sophia is my wife. You'll treat her with respect." "Of course," David replied smoothly, but his eyes remained cold when he looked at her. "I'm just surprised you've moved on so quickly from dear Rebecca." Name hit Vincent like a physical blow, and Sophia saw him retreat behind his emotional walls in an instant. David's smile widened, clearly pleased with the reaction he'd provoked. That evening, David cornered Sophia in the library. "I know what you're doing," he said without preamble. "Reading?" She replied coolly, not looking up from her book. "Trying to replace Rebecca in my brother's affections. It won't work, you know. Vincent will never love anyone the way he loved her." Sophia finally looked at him, seeing the malice in his expression clearly. "Why does that make you happy?" David's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. "'Cause Vincent doesn't deserve happiness. It's not after what he took from me." "What are you talking about?" But David just smiled and walked away, leaving Sophia with more questions and a growing sense of unease. The next morning, David was gone as suddenly as he had arrived, but the damage was done. Vincent had retreated back into his cold, distant shell, barely speaking to Sophia during their shared meals and avoiding her entirely during the day, frustrated and heartbroken by the regression in their relationship. Sophia decided to break the one rule Vincent had given her. That afternoon, while he was locked in his study conducting business calls, she made her way to the forbidden West Wing. The hallway was darker than the rest of the house, dust motes dancing in shafts of sunlight that struggled through uncleaned windows. At the end of the corridor was a door that stood slightly ajar. Sophia pushed it open and stepped into what had clearly been Rebecca's room. Unlike the rest of the house, this space was exactly as it had been left 3 years ago. Clothes still hung in the closet, jewelry sat on the dresser, and photographs covered every surface. But it was the journal lying open on the bedside table that drew Sophia's attention. Rebecca's handwriting was flowing and energetic, full of exclamation points and underlined words. The final entry was dated the day she died. "I'm so excited for tonight. Vincent has been so secretive about the engagement party, but I know it's going to be perfect. David seemed upset when I saw him earlier. Something about the family business, but I'm sure Vincent will handle it. He always does. I can't wait to dance with my future husband and celebrate our love with everyone who matters to us. This is going to be the beginning of our beautiful life together." Sophia's hands trembled as she read the innocent words, imagining the young woman who had written them with no idea it would be her last day on earth. But it was the mention of David that caught her attention. She flipped back through earlier entries and found multiple references to Vincent's brother, his jealousy over Vincent's success, his resentment about being the younger son who would inherit nothing. "What are you doing here?" Sophia spun around, to find Vincent in the doorway, his face white with fury and pain. In her absorption with the journal, she hadn't heard him approach. "Vincent, I'm sorry. I know you said not to come here, but I found something important. It's about David and the night Rebecca died. Get out." His voice was deadly quiet. "Please, just listen to me." "I think David, get out," Vincent roared, his control finally snapping. "How dare you come in here? How dare you touch her things? Read her private thoughts?" Sophia clutched the journal to her chest. "So I think your brother caused the accident that killed her and you need to know the truth." The words hung in the air between them like a blade. Vincent stared at her in shock, his anger temporarily displaced by confusion. "That's impossible," he said finally. "David wasn't even in the city that night." "According to who?" Sophia challenged. "According to him. Vincent Rebecca wrote about seeing him that day, about him being upset about the family business." "What if he was jealous enough to stop?" Vincent's voice broke.
"Dad, just stop. You don't know what you're talking about."
"You didn't know her. You don't know my family, and you certainly don't know me well enough to make accusations like that." Sophia felt tears sting her eyes, but she pressed on. "I know you well enough to see that you're destroying yourself with guilt over something that wasn't your fault. And I know David well enough to see that he enjoys your pain." Vincent looked at her for a long moment, his green eyes holding a mixture of anger, pain, and something that might have been hope. Then he shook his head and turned away. "This conversation is over. Pack your things. I'm sending you back to your family." No, the word came out stronger than Sophia felt. "I won't go." "You don't have a choice. Contract says I have to be your wife for 1 year. It doesn't say I have to be a silent, obedient wife who ignores the truth when it's staring her in the face." Vincent turned back to her, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked you. "Uncertain? Why?" he asked quietly. "Why are you fighting so hard for this? For me?" Sophia's heart pounded as she realized the truth she had been avoiding for weeks. "Because I love you," she whispered. "Pain, and I love the man you could be again if you'd let yourself heal." The silence that followed stretched between them like eternity. Vincent stared at her as if she were speaking a foreign language, his face cycling through disbelief, hope, and fear. "You can't," he said finally. "This was supposed to be a business arrangement. You can't love me." "Too late," Sophia replied, with a shaky smile. "I already do." Vincent closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there were tears on his cheeks. "Even if you're right about David, even if it wasn't my fault, I can't give you what you deserve. I can't love you the way Rebecca." "I'm not asking you to love me the way you loved Rebecca," Sophia interrupted gently. "I'm asking you to love me the way you love me. If you do, if you can." For a moment, she thought he might reach for her, might bridge the gap between them with honesty instead of fear. But then his phone rang, shattering the moment. Vincent glanced at the screen and his face went pale. "It's David," he said quietly. "Don't answer it," Sophia pleaded, but Vincent was already accepting the call. "Hello, David," he said, his voice carefully neutral. Sophia couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Vincent's expression change from confusion to horror to rage. "You what?" Vincent's voice was barely controlled. "Why are you telling me this now?" Longer pause. Then, "Where are you?" Vincent hung up and stared at the phone in his shaking hand. When he looked at Sophia, his eyes held a mixture of devastation and dawning understanding. "He confessed," Vincent said quietly. "David confessed to causing Rebecca's accident. He's been drinking, and he just told me everything." how he found out about the engagement party, how jealous he was, how he followed her that night and forced her car off the road. Sophia felt her knees go weak. "Vincent, I'm so sorry. He said he's been watching me destroy myself with guilt for 3 years, and it was the only thing that made him feel better about being the family failure." Vincent's voice was hollow, shocked. He called to gloat, to tell me that my perfect wife was never who I thought she was, that she died because of him, not me. "Where is he now?" Sophia asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Drunk in some hotel room, threatening to disappear before I can have him arrested." Vincent looked at her with something like wonder. "You were right. You saw what I couldn't see, what I didn't want to see." Sophia moved toward him carefully, as if approaching a wounded animal. "I'm so sorry you had to learn the truth this way." Vincent met her halfway across the room, his hands reaching for her face with desperate tenderness. "I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. I'm sorry I tried to send you away. I'm sorry I've been so afraid of loving you that I almost lost you too." "You haven't lost me," Sophia whispered, leaning into his touch. "I'm right here." "I do love you," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I've been fighting it for months, but I love your strength, your kindness, your refusal to let me disappear into my grief. I love the way you play piano and tend to dying plants and read to Mrs. Patterson when she thinks no one notices." Sophia felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "I love you too. Not because I want to replace Rebecca, but because you're worth loving exactly as you are." Vincent kissed her then, soft and desperate, and full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "The contract expires in 6 months," he said quietly. "I know. I don't want you to leave when it does." Sophia smiled, her heart full of hope and love and the promise of healing they could find together. "Then ask me to stay, not as part of a business arrangement, but as your wife. Your real wife." Vincent pulled back to look at her, his green eyes bright with tears and something that looked like joy. "Sophia Chen Blackwood, will you stay married to me? Will you help me turn this house back into a home? Will you love me, not because you have to, but because you choose to?" "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, to all of it." Outside Rebecca's room, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days, filling the hallway with golden light. Vincent took Sophia's hand and led her away from the past and toward their future, toward a love that had grown from the ashes of tragedy and bloomed into something beautiful and real. 6 months later, they renewed their vows in the garden where Rebecca had once spun with joy. Surrounded by friends and family, and the sound of laughter that had returned to Blackwood Estate, Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears. The greenhouse bloomed with life, and Vincent smiled more in one day than he had in 3 years. Their love story wasn't the one either of them had expected, but it was theirs, built on honesty, healing, and the courage to choose love over fear. And in the end, that made it perfect. Asterisk.